So just before we get into this episode, I wanted to let you know about a new resource available on our website. The healing process after leaving an abusive relationship can be challenging to navigate. There are plenty of different resources available, but all of that choice can be overwhelming. This is the reason I decided to create a directory of trauma coaches and therapists that work with survivors of domestic violence. They are able to provide a safe space for you to share your experience while also being able to guide you through the healing process. If you'd like to view our coaching directory, just head over to our website, afterdarkpodcast.com. These are the stories of the brave, the strong, the survivors. This is the After Dark Podcast.
If you can make it through living in abuse, you can so make it through life after abuse.
You know, like you're going to push through, and you've just gone through one of the worst experiences, and so if you imagine what kind of strength that takes, you're going to be okay.
But if I could even just help one person just to leave sooner, then that would be amazing.
This is episode 45 of the After Dark Podcast. I thought we might start at the beginning in terms of hearing your story, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your home life growing up and what the relationship was like between your parents.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I think it's very important for us to go back to our childhood to kind of see the dynamics and how that plays into our choices and situations as we are older. But yes, I grew up in a suburban home in the Chicago suburbs, and there was a lot of discord as far as the family, and my parents did divorce, and it was a traumatic situation for the children because we just didn't know a lot about what was going on, and so it was kind of challenging. So, I knew at a very early age that my goal was to have a very stable home life and, to get married and have children, and I would have the perfect family, unlike the situation that I grew up in.
So I was wondering if you could explain what it was like in the beginning of the relationship with your partner.
Was very excited to be married, and when I met my husband, I was most definitely love bombed and, believed early on that he was the perfect person for me. And then even before we got married, there were some situations that were highly unusual, where he had his old girlfriend living with him at part of the time. And, he was very secretive about a lot of things, but it's almost like I was in such a mindset of wanting to, just ignore those situations and kind of hope for the best. And so, but I was definitely love bombed, and I was, very excited to be married and have a family. And so I went on for many years just ignoring things that were just not very honest or ethical in our marriage, because I really wanted to live this dream, and we had children at the time. So of course I wanted stability for them and a happy home. And so I went along for a long time, and I got myself very busy with work and pursuing an advanced degree and raising the kids. And so I just ignored a lot of red flags that I really should have paid attention to, because, it was finally, around the 25-year mark that my light bulb went on, that I was dealing with someone that really was abusive, even though I didn't acknowledge it as abuse in the beginning. But that I found out is pretty common with men and women that end up finding themselves in an abusive situation. They don't realize it's abusive until it really gets bad. And, or there's just a major light bulb moment where you realize, wow, this has been going on for a long time. And then it's almost after the fact that you go back and do the work, the inner work, the shadow work, and you find you find out, like, okay, I was definitely chosen by this abuser because of my home life from before, or because of my being an empath or an overgiver, someone that would be accepting of bad behavior by justifying it. Well, we're all human, we make mistakes, that type of thing. So that's kind of how that all played out.
So looking back, can you think of any warning signs or red flags that your partner could have potentially been abusive?
Right. Yeah, actually, that's a wonderful question, because so many of us don't pay attention to the red flags. So the glaring one was, of course, that his old girlfriend was, back and living with him, even while we were dating, that I didn't know about that. So that's pretty glaring. But some of the more subtle red flags would be gaslighting. And gaslighting, as most of us know, is when you are slowly made to believe that you aren't seeing things right, or hearing things right, or you're misunderstanding things, or you're forgetful. You start to question your own interests, because slowly the abuser will put down your friends and family. They'll put down the food that you make, the clothes that you wear, just, but it's done in such a subtle way, and sometimes under the guise of caring for you. Well, because I care about you, I need to tell you that you really got to, stop hanging around with this person, because I just don't have a good feeling with them. And then, the targeted person, the victim, goes on to think, well, gosh, they really do care about me. They're looking out for me. So I think I will cut off that friendship, because, they really probably know better than me, because I'm involved in the relationship, when really that would have been a wonderful friend for you. And but the abuser wants to slowly make you question your own reality, but also they want to slowly isolate you. So another big red flag would be isolation, where little by little you realize that friends in the neighborhood, or even family members, or even people at work might be interacting with you in a different way now, so that they will kind of avoid you, or that you just, the friendship or the connection isn't as solid as it used to be, and you don't quite know why. But what it is the abuser is getting to those people through a smear campaign, and they are also slowly isolating their victim, so that when the time comes when the relationship will dissolve, you're left with no support system, no one really to talk to about this. And you're kind of blindsided, because you were going along life thinking, oh, I've got friends and family that, I could always call on. But the reality is after you've been a target with a very malevolent, covert narcissist, and that type of personality, you find you're really left without support systems. So, you were asking about the red flags. Some of them are glaring, like really, really kind of obvious. And then others are very, very subtle, like the gaslighting, the smearing, the isolation. And that's why recovery after leaving an abuser is just a long process. It involves a lot of soul searching, as well as research to find out, what did you go through? What kind of person was this stranger that you were married to? Like in my case, it was 27 years. I mean, it's a long time. And, but it's the subtle abuse that is verbal, emotional, is not something that the outsiders can really see, because if you are physically abused, there's often visual remnants of what has happened. And there's much more compassion for people that have been physically abused by a partner. But the emotional abuse can actually have even more devastating effects because, broken bones and bruises can heal, but the internal emotional trauma takes much longer to figure out and to heal from. And then, like I had said previously, doing some of the inner work, connecting the dots to your own childhood experiences, you might find that there's some intergenerational abuse going on, not only in your life, but in the abuser's life as well. You can go back and look at his or her parents and how they interacted with each other. And you could kind of understand a little bit more why they abuse, why abusers abuse. It doesn't make it okay, but understanding it really, really helps. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote my 4-book series called True Deceit, False Love, because not only was it healing for me, I found writing out, different things that I had been through. And then eventually I found writing poetry that was not gender or role specific. It was just more towards the nuances of abuse and recovery, that anyone could pick up this 4-book series and kind of relate to it and find some validation and healing. But, just like so many other people that have gone through this, many people find that part of the healing process is to speak your truth, and also to bring awareness to other people, whether it is hosting a podcast, whether it is writing blogs or speaking at events, or in my case, writing books, just so that not only it's healing for us, but it can shed some light on domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, parental alienation, intergenerational family trauma, and hopefully with your words, you can make a difference in someone else's life to maybe help them see that they might be in a similar situation.
So throughout this time in your life, did you have much support from friends or family?
I don't think so. I don't think I had a lot of support because, abusers like this wear kind of a false mask. That is a term that's used. In fact, in my 4-book series, True Deceit, False Love, every visual on the cover of the books is an abuser with a mask covering their face and the mask slipping. So abusers are very, very charismatic. And oftentimes they are in positions of authority where they are leaders of companies, of businesses, even of humanitarian efforts. They or social work or education or religious organizations where they are the president or the CEO, so they are looked upon in the public eye as someone with high morals and values, where that is anything but the truth. That they are almost using their positions in a way, not to say that they don't do some good. I'm sure that there are men and women out there that do good things that are in these positions, but they also have that kind of cover, because people don't see what happens behind closed doors. They just kind of see what's out in the public eye. And so these people are not only good at fooling the public, but they are also very good at fooling people close to you. And while they are doing that, they are also slowly putting you down to the people that you are close to without you knowing. They'll just make a little offhanded comment here or there, or some kind of remark. I mean, it's usually very calculated what they say and do, because they're slowly over time trying to discredit you and your values and the kind of person you are, so that people that are close to you, get a different story about what they are really experiencing with you as a friend, or in your relationship. And then they make you question. I remember hearing recently where someone said, when they confronted their abuser, they said, "Are you going to believe me or your lying eyes?" And I had to think about that. So, basically saying that, the targeted victim really doesn't have the truth, when really they do. They've seen things with their own eyes. They've experienced things. And so I just thought that was so interesting when I heard that. Are you going to believe me? I said I didn't do it. But are you going to believe your lying eyes, where you see me come out of a hotel with another person? So I'm saying I didn't do it. The abuser is saying I didn't do it. But then the targeted person can say, well, I saw you coming out of that hotel with that other person. Well, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes?
Could you explain a little about the different forms of abuse that you were suffering throughout that relationship?
Well, there's definitely a lot of other abuse. One very big one is financial abuse. And, this is not gender specific. It happens to men and women, but where your assets are slowly depleted, or they forge your name on credit cards and max them out, or they get you to sign something with regards to your home and ownership, where I even have a friend whose husband assured her, no, we're signing this just to get a home equity line. But instead, the husband had that wife sign over the deed to the house because he was planning on leaving her. And he ended up getting the house, and she got nothing because her name was not on the deed. It was originally, but when he tricked her into signing, she lost her home. So there is definitely financial abuse. In my case, all of our joint assets and investments were put 95% in his name, and that was done over a several year period. I also had large sums of money invested for our children for their college funds. And after I chose to divorce, I filed for divorce, and then there's discovery. I found out that all of our children's money was completely depleted. He had slowly taken out money from their accounts, putting it into a different account with his name. And then, so by the time, I chose to divorce, which, then we look, and there's not even any evidence that there's a current account for the children. And then the financial abuse really ramps up after you leave. I mean, they want to make sure that you are destroyed in every way. They want you homeless. And I was homeless, like many men and women are after they leave an abuser. And, you're just left having to pick up the financial pieces. And then, of course, they abuse the judicial system, so they will file false claims, or they'll keep taking you back to court. And, the targeted victim is just so shell-shocked by the whole experience with the family court system that they end up going through numerous lawyers. I think the average is between 5 and 15 lawyers for the targeted victim, where the abuser can stay with one lawyer the whole time because they make sure they find, a criminal, type lawyer, so that they can kind of think the same way that they do. So there's definitely other types of abuse. There's financial abuse. There's sexual abuse. And, it's a very uncomfortable thing to talk about. I don't know how comfortable I am talking about it, but there's definitely sexual abuse that took place in my situation, and I know it does in others, and then there's the abuse of parental alienation, where the abuser will have brainwash the kids to discount and devalue and eventually have nothing to do with the loving parent. So that, this targeted parent who once had a loving relationship with their kids now no longer has any relationship with them because of lies and half-truths and, basically getting the kids to kind of like a Stockholm syndrome or independent thinker phenomenon, get them to just think it's their idea to move away from that parent, like that parent did something very bad. I even know of a situation where a wife did this to her husband and, did this parental alienation. He didn't see it coming, but she accused the father of sexually molesting the children. And these children were adults now, and that did not happen at all. But the wife was so convincing in court, and because the court systems, are just not that knowledgeable about domestic violence or narcissist abuse, or, they don't, or if they are knowledgeable, they go ahead and support the abuser because it is job security for them, because, the honest, good parent, wants to fight this injustice, these lies, these falsehoods. So this father spent thousands and thousands of dollars trying to defend himself for something that he didn't even do, and so the abusers really want to destroy you in any way they can. So the abuse is emotional, physical, financial, sexual, but then also if it involves, and many of them do involve parental alienation, they are unfortunately damaging these children for life because they've lost the loving parent, that support, and they're trying to navigate things without them, and they're kind of living a lie. They're not they're believing things that were not true at all. And then in my case, actually, right at the end, it did get physical. So after 27 years, it got physical, and that was when my light bulb went on, and I kind of knew that there was no way I was going to stay in this, but I didn't say anything. For someone who normally can communicate, I just kind of went radio silent. And so I didn't say anything after he basically confessed to some pretty unethical wrongdoings that also involved our children. I kind of went quiet, and then it was not too long after, a day or two after, he physically shoved me up against the wall, so got very, very physical with me, saying, "Don't you dare divorce me. And if you divorce me, I'll take your house, your money, and your children." And that's what he did. He took the house, the money, and the children. But it did get physical at the end.
So how did you eventually get out of that relationship?
Well, after he shoved me up against the wall, when he said, "Don't you dare divorce me," I knew that what I needed to do was to divorce him. So I immediately got a lawyer and started the whole legal nightmare that I went through. But I filed for divorce. Even though it was only, like a 2-year period, it was extremely drawn out and extremely high conflict. And he actually, even in the beginning, and I haven't thought about this in a long time, but right in the beginning, after he got the divorce papers, he said to me, or right before the divorce papers, he said something like, "Are you going to state that you're divorcing me because of mental cruelty?" And I'm thinking, now I know abusers tell on themselves, now I know that they project, that type of thing. But at the time I didn't know that. And I thought, wow, it was strange enough for him to say, "Don't you dare divorce me." But then to also say, are you going to accuse me of mental cruelty? And, to be honest with you, well, I didn't even know that I wasn't familiar with how divorce works and filling out paperwork or any of that stuff. So I didn't know. I know that now that there's some states that have no fault divorce or that type of thing, but yeah, I just didn't even know what he was talking about. Mental cruelty. What are you talking about? But now, of course, I understand that he was really telling on himself, that yes, for many, many years, he engaged in mental cruelty and was very nervous that that would probably become public record. They're very, very concerned about what it looks like to the outside people. In fact, we even through the proceedings had what's called a deposition, where some very illegal, unethical things came out. And he made sure with his lawyer that deposition, they told me it was destroyed, but I guess the term is that it's sealed, that it's put away, that it cannot be public record. And actually there's a good chance that, because I'm still in court, it's been almost a decade, and my ex-husband is still taking me to court. So, so because he's doing that, I think we might have to unseal that deposition, because just to get him to stop, to leave me alone, and let the truth be public about some things. It's unbelievable. And I've heard of so many husbands and wives going through these things. I guess you don't even have to be legally married, but to still go through court situations. And it's just unbelievable that it just continues and continues and continues. And at some point, you've got to just realize how very ill these people are, that they, even if they've moved on. And I believe my ex, the last I heard, I don't really follow him or think about him much, but I did get some paperwork with this last legal proceeding. And, he is engaged to be married to our next door neighbor who we've lived next to, and, raised our kids next to each other for all those years, so my kids were adults when I finally filed for divorce. It would have been a big nightmare, even worse than what I experienced if my children were minors and I had to deal with custody and the heartache of not being able to see my children every day, that type of thing.
Can you share a little bit about what the healing process has been like since leaving the abusive relationship?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, it's been done in many stages. Like I said, it's been almost a decade, and it is still, I think I'll probably be in some form of my recovery journey from this. I think that'll even last a lifetime, because it affects, the children and everything as well too. But I think in the beginning, you're just kind of shell-shocked, and you have to look out for your basic safety needs of just food, shelter, employment, transportation, just your basic kinds of things. And then you find you're left with so much financial responsibility. Even if it's not yours, they manipulate numbers and trick you, trick things, and things that you don't even know about, you find out afterward. So there's that, there was several years of working, sometimes even 4 jobs at one time, to be able to pay off some of these debts. And I'm not saying that I didn't incur any of the debts, but I certainly didn't incur what I was responsible for. And of course, the abuser is left with a brand new vehicle, luxury car, where the targeted person is left either without a car or with the old family vehicle that hasn't had an oil change or new tires in years. So there's so many unexpected expenses. So I think part of the healing was just trying to get your affairs in order, and getting yourself to a safe place. is also very challenging because, your credit is ruined. I believed our home was paid off for 10 years. That's what he always told me. We both had good salaries. He had like double mine. But I was definitely guilty of just, handing over my paycheck, thinking that, he had our family's best interest, in mind. But I guess that wasn't the case at all. But anyway, so there's the shock part of just your basic safety needs of where you're going to live and how are you going to cope, and then the financial, and then you can slowly start working on the emotional part. Even though that's the most important, you really have to kind of take care of the basics first. And so that was a process. And in that process, you learn, like I said before, that you kind of lose a lot of your support system. And I did have a few friends I could really count on, but actually recently I found that one of those who I had known a lifetime was very involved in the deceit and the betrayal. And, just I had no idea. And that was extremely painful, to learn that. And so you've got to be more discerning about who you let in your life or who you continue to stay in a relationship with, because not everyone, really has your back. And so, but I'd like to offer hope to your listeners, because really, even though it can be a very, very challenging process, not only with, your spouse or your partner, but then going back and realizing other people, family and friends in your life contributed to this, or really aren't the people that you think that they are. Just because you have the value of honesty and goodness and compassion doesn't mean that everyone else has those same values. But we tend to think the people we surround ourselves with have those values, but it's not always the case. But there is hope to go through it. It takes a very strong person to be able to go through this kind of emotional abuse, and spousal abuse. And actually, in many ways, the abuser picks you because you are a strong person. You're intelligent, you're capable, you're loving, you're an empath. All of those things that are very good actually do end up serving you after you go through this. And so I'm testament that, your life can get better. I found for myself personally that writing was the best thing I could have done for myself. I was a special education English teacher for 35 years in the Chicago suburbs. And 12 of those years, I was an adjunct professor. So I always loved reading and writing. But I really found, writing kind of helped me, like some sort of creative outlet to make sense of what I went through. And my first book that became a 2020 Best Books Award winner, it was endorsed by James Redfield, was a spiritual fiction. God Came to My Garage Sale, which is also the title of my website. And, through that, I had many different versions in that book. But the end version of it did not address any domestic violence. It just kind of left that unspoken. It was basically an atheist woman had to have a garage sale, and because she lost everything, and then some miracles happened that made her pay attention to signs and synchronicities, and to give her reassurance that there was more to this world, and that she was going through these hardships for a higher divine purpose. So that book was very healing. But then I found I was still having to deal with the emotional fallout from, the significant abuse that I went through. And so I would I would listen to podcasts, and I would read books, and I would attend conferences just to learn about people that have this narcissistic personality or cluster B disorder, or why abusers abuse, and what what is a codependent or what is an empath, just trying to learn things. And I would write down all these terms. And at one point I had 100 terms to look up, and then it wasn't much longer and the list grew to over 1,000. And so my first book in the True Deceit, False Love series is actually 15,555 terms and phrases on domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, and parental alienation. So, and then my work, I've done acrostic and free verse poetry and even a survivor's workbook. My work has been highly endorsed by influencers in the abuse recovery field, which has just been very validating, that they find what I'm doing not only is good for healing myself, but can actually help heal other people. So I found writing to be something very therapeutic. And then eventually, like 3 years ago, I moved from the Chicago suburbs to the Caribbean. And I just wanted a change of scenery, and I wanted to kind of have a new life. And that's what I did. So I've been by the sun and the sea for the last 3 years, and really found that I belong somewhere immersed in nature. And, the new surroundings gave me a lot of hope, and, plus it's just a lot of fun. So I'm enjoying life as opposed to just letting everything I went through destroy me. The abusers want you destroyed and not happy. And unfortunately for him, he didn't destroy me. I'm doing great. My health has never been better. And I am living a beautiful life in the Caribbean as a successful author. There is hope, but it is a journey, and it's a life-changing journey. And, it's very challenging. There can be, I'm sure that there are a lot of people that aren't strong enough to make it through that, especially if they've lost visitation with their children, even if it's based on lies and they know the truth. The heartache of not living your life with your children it's so unnatural that some people get so despondent they don't feel they can live anymore. And I think abusers want you to kill yourself, or they want you to be murdered. They and even then they will keep a narrative up that they were the victim, or that they were the good person, that their ex-spouse was the crazy person. When really, when you're dealing with people like this, it's really the opposite. They project to you what they are actually doing, and they tell on themselves. And, I remember hearing stories about these exes and how unstable they were. And, they just would cut them down. But I think that was all, they could have very easily been left, just like I left my abuser. If I didn't speak out, he probably had a story to tell all sorts of people that, well, I was crazy and I was, mentally or physically incapable of anything, but because I'm speaking out, and telling the truth, and addressing, family violence, and bringing awareness, it's kind of like his narrative doesn't hold water anymore, because and hopefully there would be some discerning people out there that would say, well, gosh, she doesn't appear at all like what we were told. But, sometimes though, after that, the damage has already been done. So you have to cut your losses and realize, okay, if there are people that you wanted in your life that you thought were solid friends, but if they aren't in your life now, realize that they either weren't very sincere, or they bought into the lies, but for whatever reason, they're not questioning. And not one person from my neighborhood ever contacted me and said, oh, I'm sorry about what's happened, what is your side of this, or anything. Not one person. And luckily, I didn't have a need to try to defend myself Because first of all, I didn't even know what I would be defending myself for. What lies did he say? But if I just realized some people that I thought were worth it and had integrity really don't, and I don't want those people in my life anyway. Then, so when you let go of some toxic relationships as a result of this coming out of these experiences, you do let room in your heart and in your life for more like-minded people and people that really get it, and much more sincere, honest people.
Just before we do wrap things up, I was wondering if we might be able to end on some advice that you might be able to give to somebody that might be currently in an abusive relationship.
Well, I would say, look at your relationship, do some soul searching and reflection on your relationship. Your relationship might be something that can be workable. You might be able to communicate with your partner and come to a more equitable understanding, and they might respond in a positive way, and people do change. But a lot of abusers do not change. And so I think one big thing is to kind of look at your situation and some of the things that you were kind of confused about, or that you kind of think was kind of abusive or very mean, and really analyze whether it is. And some of that is also just tuning into podcasts or reading, doing some research and learning about this kind of thing. And if you find that you do need to get out of the situation, I wish I would have had a resource that would say, put some money aside first, make sure that your car has an oil change and new tires or something like that. Make sure that you take some time to look into your family's finances to actually get an accurate picture of where it is. Because oftentimes it's the targeted person that kind of hands over the finances to the other partner. So, I think ideally, if you can kind of plan, if you decide you want to leave, plan your escape a little bit better than I did. And most of us, a lot of us just kind of have that knee-jerk reaction when we know it's toxic and dangerous, and we just get out, But if you are able to do a little research on where you stand, and then really get some good advice if you have to go the legal route. I mean, ideally, it would be great not to even involve the courts in anything, because they are, many of them are for profit, and a lot in family court goes in favor of the abuser. That's just kind of what happens. The truth isn't always regarded as important. And even if you have document and evidence, I even came to court one time with evidence, like, here is documentation, and the judge says, I don't want to see that. So they don't necessarily. So the advice would be to, if you can work on your relationship, and some people find that if they go to counseling, it can be helpful, or if they both just kind of can work together, they could save the relationship. But if you realize that you're dealing with someone that's probably not going to change, or that has really done some very unethical and abusive things, and you need to get out, do what you can to plan to get out. There's not a lot of resources on that. There's one amazing book by Tracy A. Malone called Divorcing Your Narcissist. You Can't Make This Stuff Up. And that is a wonderful tool, actually just chiming into Tracy Malone's Narcissist Abuse Support YouTube channel. She has a lot of workshops, and she addresses so many different topics, and has other people interviewed on her show. And so it's a process. It's a process that takes a lot of time, and it's heartbreaking, because you've lost, you believe the person that you partnered with would be there forever. Your dream of just riding out into the sunset together has been shattered. So that's just one of many losses. that happens. So it's a challenging time, but I also find that you need to take care of yourself physically, you know, with your sleep and your food and your exercise, just take care of yourself physically, but also just do some special things for yourself. They talk about self-care, and that could mean so many different things for people. It could be as simple as just taking a nice hot Epsom salt bath every night. That could be your self-care, or it could be carving out an hour in your day to go for a walk in nature and just explore the beauty of the world. It could mean different things for different people. But definitely, I have found some sort of creative outlet, whether it's a hobby, whether it's working on cars or working in the garden or writing or painting or, creating something, cooking, whatever it is, find your passions. And these could be passions that you always had, but you kind of put to the side because your partner didn't like it or didn't appreciate it or whatever. So rediscover who you are and what you like, and that will bring you some joy as well. All of us have challenges, even if this particular topic doesn't, resonate with your own situation, all of us have challenges in our lives. But if we handle our challenges with love, honesty, and goodness, and an open heart, I think we'll be able to be that much better off. And so handle these challenges with love.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story of hope. If you know of anyone that might be struggling with domestic violence, please feel free to share this podcast with them. If you believe in the value of sharing these stories and would like to donate to show your support, I'd really appreciate it. To find out more about donating, please visit afterdarkpodcast.com/donate. So, until next time, my name is Isaac Morano, and this is the After Dark Podcast.